So this video is on rapid onset gender dysphoria and regret. Rapid onset gender dysphoria is kind of a loaded term that doesn't really capture what the cohort I'm talking about and their motivations. It looks from the outside to be rapid onset gender dysphoria. But what's actually going on is more of a subtle, slow cult indoctrination. I know people throw that word around cult really like pejoratively, and that's not how I mean it at all. I mean it quite literally. I think so. Let's go back to like the early tens, say 2012 to 2015. On primarily Tumblr. This is a blogging, I'm sure if you're watching this, you know what Tumblr is. But yeah, it's a social media site, app that technically a blog, but you could repost, much like on Twitter, like other people's stuff, follow people, and it wasn't used so much as like blogging, like long form writing, as it was more for like sharing memes, quick, like much like Twitter, like quick thoughts, photos, a lot of memes, and this platform really appealed to teenage girls for a number of reasons, mostly due to fandoms. So people who were kind of obsessive over one particular TV show or book series or band would go on Tumblr because that's where all of the kind of where the fandom existed, right? Where other people who were obsessed with that same thing were making art about that thing, talking about that thing, sharing, videos and, fan fiction especially. So just kind of like original art based off of this existing media. But also on Tumblr was far left progressive. Progressive isn't the right word. Even left isn't the right word. I mean, that's, how it started or how it was understood. Social justice, it's what it was. It was really, really social justice focused. And that kind of ethos was woven into all of these fandoms and everything that they did. So, but in the periods of like 2012 to 2015, it was very, very popular amongst these mostly teenage girls with, hardline progressive values as they saw it, social justice, gay rights, trans rights, anti-racism. So something about girls who are typically drawn to fandoms is they are typically maybe kind of lonely in their real life, and the fandom serves a social purpose. So it starts out as just like you're obsessively interested in this one thing. But then once you go online searching for content around that, you realize that there's this whole community of people, and they become kind of like more so obsessed with the community around that piece of media than they are about the piece of media itself. In these online cultures, again on Tumblr, primarily, that far left social justice ethos is woven through everything. And it's almost kind of mandatory to have a minority status yourself, because if you don't, you're worthless. The kind of memes were like, shut your cishet mouth, things like that, where it's just like constantly not just speaking poorly of cishet people, but it was perfectly acceptable to be abusive towards those people. The way to opt yourself out of being a cishet a person is just to change your pronouns. For one, you could just change your pronouns from she, her to they, them. Identify as non-binary, and boom, you're good. You've rid yourself of the oppression category you had that was not allowing you to really fully participate in the community, because again, you were scum and an outsider and dangerous and oppressive. yada yada. It's just sort of baked into the culture. So you have to have something that gives you license to speak. So if you're a person of color, you're probably going to be able to avoid the having to change your pronouns because you've already got that that marginalization point as it's understood. That being said, what's really happening here is a culture of victimhood where your value and your status is directly derived from how victimized you are. I mean, it's very Western, so they're not thinking globally here, but yeah, so, and mostly American, North American, let's say, understanding of the world. And so basically, if you are in a identity category that these teenagers in the U.S. Perceive to be a minority, then there's your victimhood point. You're good, you got it. But if you don't automatically come in with that, if you're not actually homosexual, if you're not actually black or native or Latinx or however that's pronounced, if you don't have this this minority identity category, again, you're useless and you've got no right to speak on anything. Now, the confounding or kind of ironic feature of all this is the majority of people who are drawn to these fandom communities are white teenage girls who are by and large heterosexual, just because the vast majority of females are, of course. So they're in the, so it's and the reason why it appeals so much to white teenage girls is because a lot of those people who actually do come from minority categories, they have a sense of community in reality, in real life, a sense of identity through that as well. So largely who are gravitating towards these online communities were straight white girls from secular homes. So they didn't have like a religious identity. They didn't have that kind of external source of meaning and community. And that's who's really flocking to these online forums and this obsessive kind of online life, and therefore susceptible to the ideology that tells them, that being cis is bad, being straight is bad, and being white is bad. Now, you can easily change one of those things about yourself. If you change your pronouns to they, them, declare yourself to be non-binary, you basically got the trans thing taken care of. So there's your minority point. But because the culture is so fixated on victimhood and kind of an influx identity, because none of this is grounded in reality. It's all very language based. So inevitably, what happens is that non-binary identity no longer serves its purpose. It's no longer. That's the other thing is you get the online reward that comes from an updated identity is huge. I'm not sure if you're watching this, you're probably also familiar with the social media personality. I'm not sure what to call this person. Rowan Jetty Knox, who had a trans child and then a trans husband, maintained all along that they weren't trans themselves, and then became non-binary, and then I think a lesbian, and then non-binary, and then a trans man, because each new identity gets you another dose of attention and love and affirmation from your online community. And so Helena Kirchner talks about this really well. She fell down this exact rabbit hole. It was first non-binary, or they, them, and it was overwhelming to go from being the cis white girl who had to shut up and not talk about anything and just support everybody else, to getting love bombed because of the they, them pronouns. And then that becomes old news and it's no longer exciting. But what if you change your pronouns to Zer? You've uncovered something new and important about yourself, and you get to tell the community about it. And then, yay, all this love and support, and you're so brave or whatever. But again, the meaninglessness of it, and the fact that it has no bearing in your real life, that it only seems to have any sort of value in the online space, is where it kind of got into dangerous territory, because then in order to validate your trans identity, in order to be taken seriously by your peers in real life, your family, etc., in order for them to accept the real you, like your friends online did, you need to transition, and to actually manifest your trans identity. Because the cis-het world doesn't understand trans identities outside of the pathologizing medical framework. So transition becomes necessary to validate the minority status and to to materialize that identity. Another thing is how self-reinforcing the ideology is, because if you believe it, and if you're a girl from a progressive part of the world, you've got a progressive friend group, it's almost impossible. And this is now the case. When I was talking before, I was talking about pre-2015, well, maybe more about like pre-2017 social media spheres. Since that, it 100% broke into the mainstream. It left the Tumblr confinement. And so with it spreading beyond just the fandoms and the really kind of obsessive nerdy girls online, that's when you see kind of your more typical average straight girls, young women, deciding that they're non-binary and have they them pronouns because they get wind of this ideology, right? That cishet is bad. Like if you believe in the structure that the ideology presents of the oppressors and the oppressed, and that a cis person it just identifies, and relates with all of the stereotypes associated with their sex, and has no discomfort in any part of their body, or is just completely 100% comfortable with current given gender norms and understandings. If you feel that way, that means you're cis. If you don't feel that way, it means you have a unique gender to some extent. And so basically anyone, really, if you believe it, you're not going to be cis, because nobody feels 100% comfortable in the social expectations of their sex, or certainly a lot of young women don't feel comfortable in their bodies, certainly developing, etc. So another thing that people outside don't seem to understand is how much this ideology appeals to typically feminine women, girls and young women. Because it goes back to that victimhood thing. If you are just kind of typical, you're gender conforming, you're cis, you're straight, you are pretty much just come across like just a standard girl, woman, whatever. That's a problem. If they were naturally gender nonconforming, naturally homosexual, if they were actually lesbians, these are girls who aren't actually falling for it as much, because they've already got their marginalization point within this group, within this understanding. Again, that's why it's always primarily white girls and young women, for the same reason. So because they're naturally feminine, and they typically also just appreciate like feminine style, feminine, like they're not gender nonconforming is the best way to put this, naturally. and a lot of them resent the fact that they have to present in a masculine manner in order for their transness to be taken seriously. This is how they frame it, how they phrase it. That they have to butch it up in order for their transness to be taken seriously, and they resent that because it's cis heteronormativity, to associate like gender stereotypes with certain genders. There's no consistency in the logic to this other than annihilating gender. So you queer gender is how you do that. So these girls who are naturally feminine, these women who are naturally feminine, what they do is they will, again, transition. They'll take testosterone because once they have that trans point, once they have masculinized their bodies to a certain extent, then they can go back to wearing the clothes that they are most comfortable in and expressing themselves in a way that they're most comfortable, which is their natural femininity. But they feel like that's not allowed without the trans identity and without manifesting that gender fuckery to some extent via testosterone. Again, that's what a lot of people on the outside of this don't understand, is that these girls literally have zero desire to be male. It's all about the language, and it's about the cause. It's about distancing themselves from the gender binary, which they see as oppressive. And if you belong to the gender binary, then you are enforcing that oppression. So they're not thinking that they're going from women to man, not at all. They're thinking that they are removing themselves from that oppressive gender binary by becoming trans. And then once they're trans, then their sexuality is no longer straight because they're not cis. And so any attraction that they have is just queer. Because you can't say what their gender is, like, because so when you're outside of the binary, your sexuality is just queer. This is how it's understood. That's what I think a lot of the people who are combating the ideology don't understand, that for most of the young women, this is a cult. This is an ideology that they have devoted their bodies to. And they do not want to be men. So when I see like these parents basically saying, like, I want her to know that she can be, as masculine as she wants to be, or date women. It's like, no. If either of those things were real for her, she wouldn't need the trans thing. The trans thing is just the means of fully adopting and embodying the ideology, the tenets of the cult, which is destroying the gender binary, or at least that's how it's come to be understood after the whole victimhood thing has been embraced. Another thing is once they transition, or once they've medicalized to a degree where they've masculinized their bodies, it's often then that they actually experience dysphoria. Oh, wait, I need to go back. Rapid onset gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is such a grab bag term, but oftentimes with the rapid onset gender dysphoria, the ROGD cohort, what's happening is they're reporting they have gender dysphoria because that's how their parents understand being trans. That's how you seek medical intervention, is by reporting you have gender dysphoria. Most of them don't actually experience any, again, as is typical in adolescent females, a lot of them are quite uncomfortable in their bodies, etc. But it's not gender dysphoria. Again, it's a grab bag term, so who are we to say what gender dysphoria is? But typically what's being reported as gender dysphoria is just their explanation for why they need to transition. It's what the cis heteros who don't understand trans identities need to hear in order to enable and support the transition. But then a lot of them do develop gender dysphoria because when you spend all this time ruminating about gender, and so a lot of them take on these like cute boy identities, and then when they've got this curvy developing body, it's like the online avatar that is really just an extension of them, their ideology, it becomes internalized to a certain degree, and that can create the gender dysphoria, where they're basically associating with this avatar that they've created, which is essentially just the representation of their commitment to the ideology, but it ultimately becomes a source of dysphoria, because the more they live it, the more kind of real it feels. Anyway, this is not everybody who fits this demographic, but this is just something I've seen a lot, heard a lot. Excuse me. And then another way that the gender dysphoria develops is by the actual transition. So, but they don't frame it as such. That's the thing. And that's where we're going to get into regret and how complicated it is in this context. Because what happens is they masculinize their bodies to materialize the trans identity, but then they are really uncomfortable in their bodies. They're uncomfortable with the masculine reflection, the body hair, but they know if they're trans, then those things are good. That's what they're after, right? The mental gymnastics. It's kind of just constantly being reframed to fit the current situation. So what I've seen is the masculinized body is actually what's making them uncomfortable, what they have discomfort in. But how they reframe that is having a trans body in a cis heteronormative world. So it stays within the victimhood oppression dynamic. So even though these are budding feelings of regret and actual gender dysphoria at the dissonance between their now body and reflection, and the fact that that's very uncomfortable, they don't accept it as I've made a mistake. That would be so not only, I guess I'm jumping right into it now. Not only would that be the enormity of the regret of the decision, because testosterone isn't very undoable. In a lot of ways, a lot of things go back, but not others. And so you have to think about how young these women are, and just confronting in all aspects of life. When we make a huge decision that we can't easily back out from, most people aren't going to face the regret head on. They're just going to reframe it to be, okay, well, this is how I can work with this, or this is how I can make the best out of this. And it's not even something that you probably consciously do. It's just, something that you just kind of reframe because you can't undo what you did. So what's the point in dwelling? So I think that's a lot of the psychology of twisting the any regret that they may feel into just again a facet of a cis heteronormative society that is really uncomfortable to navigate in a trans body, and so that's one way that they deal with how they don't address the regret is by just reframing it as like a minority stress, or just keeping within that victim oppressor framework. Another reason why you can't face it directly is because this isn't just a medical decision that you've made. This is your entire worldview. This is your religion. And if you start second guessing that, you're second guessing your entire community, again, your worldview, your righteous cause, the thing you've dedicated the last few years of your life to, usually by that point. And not just that, but your sense of self, your social network is all tied up in this. And a lot of them, their professional networks are as well, because a lot of these people who came of age on Tumblr pre-2015 are now professional adults working for the, APA. The ACLU. They are in positions of influence, and they cannot. And that was another thing. The culture of early this thing really took off around 2012 and then skyrocketed in 2015. Right, that's when we see the charts just skyrocketed as far as female to male transitioning goes. And again, that's how the medical professionals see it, female to male transitioning. That's not what they're doing. That is not what they're doing. That's what the clinics see and document. So around this time, when this ideology is just really, really just a stew in these online spaces, the ethos was like a calling to get into positions of where the gatekeepers are, as this was understood. So basically, we need to get cis people out of our healthcare. We need to be in the gender clinics, in the therapy offices, in the courtrooms, in the surgeons, in the operating rooms. It was very much this like, you see all these posts about, oh, I'm going into this, I'm going into social work, I'm going into psychology, I'm going into all, because they dedicated their lives, right, to this new religion of theirs, and so they see the righteous calling of putting themselves of going to school, getting PhDs even, and putting themselves into positions of power where they can make, as they see it, where they can help their community, where they can get all of these transphobic, cis heteronormative doctors out of trans healthcare and give it to the actual trans people who know what they're doing, who understand what's happening here, and who aren't going to challenge people or make anybody prove their transness or so when you understand that, the kind of the institutional capture probably makes more sense. But yeah, that was the kind of rah calling of the early, and again, when I say early, I mean like the early teens, when this stuff really started to spread and really just became a wildfire. And so they put themselves into positions of power. And people hear that like it's like this nefarious thing. 100% well-intentioned. 100% I need to help my community. I need to. It's very much obviously it serves that need of having a community and having a righteous calling and feeling like you're important and you're doing the Lord's work, as it were. So obviously always those feelings have a are kind of selfish, I guess, but it's not like a conspiracy to trans all the kids. It's very much a we need to do right by our community, and I'm gonna go to medical school for the next 8 years so that I can do that. So it is very much a noble to a certain degree. I guess as much as you can say that about any kind of zealot. Is it noble? Yeah. But that's what happened. This is a religion that became very, very popular amongst nerdy girls online. They proselytized their religion. Well, and that's another thing that I haven't even touched on in this video, because again, this is about the girls. But a major facet of this is obviously the males, who are not in it for a religion. They are usually in it for a paraphilia, right? Because they've got autogynephilia, and they want nothing else in the world than to be regarded as women. This religion is just super useful, and so they support it and they enable it, and they're also in positions of power, and they already were, though. They were, but there's a lot of that going on. So just to make that straight, this is not just a bunch of millennial and Gen Z girls, women leading this charge. A lot of it, they are men who are and were in positions of power, in law offices, in doctors' offices, CEOs, etc. And but as far as the young people goes, it's primarily girls and young women. Anyway, so getting back to regret. So when you understand that, if you understand the depth of this religion and the it's not just a it's definitely not a medical decision for them, but it's not just a personal identity either. It's a community. It's a profession. It's a religion. Obviously, it's a whole. Excuse me. It's their everything. And so when you start to go, well, I actually hate the fact that I have to shave every day, or that I have a beard, or that my voice is this low, or that my clitoris looks like a small penis, and that's the one that that a lot of them are really freaked out about, is the genital growth stuff, and that certainly is not at all reversible. So anyway, they have a lot of regrets that they are not confronting and they are not addressing, because again, the point was never the physical transition. The point was manifesting their religion. I hope this makes sense. I know it's really rambly, and I know it doesn't really make any sense to a lot of people who are outside of it, or who still think of it in terms of transitioning from one sex to the other, because that is really kind of how the males approach this. The ones with gender dysphoria, who are autogynephilic, I study that cohort quite a bit. I talk and write about them quite a bit, and I interact with a lot of them, obviously, who seem completely oblivious to this, like completely oblivious, because they don't understand the social, that this is a social calling for most of these young women. It has nothing to do with gender dysphoria as the autogynephiles understand it, or as I understood it, or as a lot of other kind of old school trans people or whatever. And there are definitely still young people with gender dysphoria who are seeking transition for the purpose of blending in as the opposite sex, and we can discuss the ethics or the efficacy or whatever of that. That's not for this video. That's not what this is about. I'm just trying to explain what's going on with what we call rapid onset gender dysphoria, and why detransition or facing regret is going to be way more complicated, and it's just gonna, they double down, and they're and that's what I see at the APA, is the people writing the guidelines for how psychologists are supposed to interact with these patients are people who themselves transitioned in this heyday. They're people who are pushing their religion, who are terrified of facing their own regret, and they are codifying their regret away, and that's I want to say it's unforgivable, but it's like they are victims too. They got swept up in this when they were teenage girls online, and now they are grown, usually NBs. That's the thing, is that very few of them like maintain a binary trans man identity. They did that at first to kind of get the transition underway, but it seems a lot of the your Chase Strangios and a lot of the people in WPATH and the APA and these other Planned Parenthood, a lot of these people who put themselves in these positions, they use they them pronouns now, and they're masculinized, irreversibly, but they usually go from doing the he, him thing to the they, them thing, and identify as non-binary or just queer or things like that. You've got full-grown female adults identifying as demi-boys and taking this seriously, because again, they've devoted their bodies to it, and to a religion they adopted when they were young. So how do you regret that? How do you undo that? It's very, the detransitioners that we mostly hear from today are typically ones who had a more kind of binary understanding of their transition, who are like, I've got gender dysphoria, or they again, grab bag term, but they have issues with their body and issues with being female that they associate with their gender, and they transition to male, that'll fix it, is a lot of how the early detransitioners experienced it. Much like myself, it's like my problem is with my body, and if I fix this, then I'll just live comfortably as a man. So I actually relate a lot more with detransitioners than I do with most trans people, because most the current detransitioners are people who went in with the same mind frame as myself. Is transitioning will fix this psychological problem I have with my body. But so people who were like, oh shit, that didn't work. In fact, it makes me feel worse. I hate living this way. I'm going to detransition and go back to living as a woman. As terrible as that is, and as sorry as I am for them, at least it makes sense. Like that you can do something with that. It's like, this was a mistake. This didn't work like I needed it to work, and I'm going to do everything I can to undo it. A lot of it I can't undo. I'll have to, basically kind of deal with living with the rest of my life, etc. And it's horrible, but it's easy to make sense of. Like, yeah, it was a mistake. It didn't work. Undo it. With the hordes and hordes of these young women who transitioned for a much more external reason. I guess that's how I define this, as transitioning for an internal reason or an external reason. And the people who transition for external reasons to join this club, to join this cult, they can't just go shit, this was a mistake, it didn't work, because they did it for a cause, and they have to recant that cause and then also accept the fact that they sacrificed their body to that cause. And when you think of it, it's a bullshit theory. Like it's not even like it's not a good religion. It's all just language and bullshit, and it's meaningless. And yeah, so that's my explanation of Rajdi and regret, and how it's so much more complicated than just accepting they made a mistake. Yeah, if you have questions, please put them in the comments. I would love to talk more about this. Yeah, anyway, thanks for listening.